Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 5:02 p.m. I would like to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the San Francisco Unified School District Board of Education's Buildings and Grounds Committee. My name is Ann Shu, and I'm the chair of this committee. Deborah, would you please note the presence of Commissioners Boges, Sanchez, and myself? Thank you. Our first order of business is B1, Resolution 223-8 SP1, resolution in support of the naming of the Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy Garden. I would like to, now I want to ask Commissioner Boges and Sanchez, are you two aware of these two? Because this is new to me.
These are going to be on the agenda for tomorrow's board meeting for adoption, for action by the board.
So it was previously read at a board meeting assigned to this committee?
It was a first reading at a recent board meeting, and then it's been sent to this committee for discussion, and
yeah, please come.
We will decide whether to positively endorse or negatively or neutrally endorse.
Okay, so why don't I?
This is our the principal, Emmanuel Stewart from Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy.
Oh, wonderful.
The dais.
Just in time. Welcome, sir. Now, while you get situated, why don't I ask for some public comments on this item? Do we have any public comments?
I'd like to speak to the resolution, meaning Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy Garden.
Thank you. Seeing no public comments, why don't we have the principal? Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Emmanuel Stewart. I'm the proud but very humble principal here at Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy here in San Francisco. I will speak a little bit about this as I knew it. 2 years ago, of course, we knew we were in a pandemic. I got a chance to become the new principal at Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy. I was approached at that time by Marissa Martinez, who was a kindergarten teacher at Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy. She came to me because the community, the PFC group over there, along with an artist, knew about Zamora Moon. Zamora Moon was a student at Harvey Milk who passed away several years before that of a childhood disease of cancer. It touched me because I'm a cancer survivor. 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I survived that, and I stand before you to be a leader in our community around this idea of making sure that anything related to cancer that I would champion, particularly if it's for a child. My promise to Ms. Martinez before she moved on was to make sure that the garden would be legally or binding by San Francisco Unified School District in a way that it can stay for a long time. I had some work with Superintendent Dr. Matthews with renaming Carver Elementary School's library after Ms. Louise Jones, who was the principal at Carver Elementary School for a number of years, outstanding administrator for our school site. So with that, knowing that knowledge, I decided that on me and our community that we would do what's necessary and have a resolution in place to name it. Before I even thought about this, it was a plaque left. This thing is heavy.
You need help?
I'm just gonna tell you. This sat on my desk when I got over to Harvey Milk. I want y'all to see this. The artist who did this worked directly with the community at Harvey Milk. And then my job became really easy to make sure the resolution was written and that this garden at our school site would be named after Zamora Moon. Again, the resolution, the first reading came in March 8th. Now it's the final reading and presented to Buildings and Grounds. We would love to be able to put this up there, have Ms. Martinez come back in the summertime to make sure that she knows that her baby life was not in vain and that cancer, particular childhood cancer, is something very serious and that we can make a difference in at least the community who wants it, but in many children who are fighting cancer. That's the only thing that I have to say. Again, it was already made, was sitting on my desk. My job was to make sure we did the right thing. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Commissioners?
Thank you, Principal Stewart. We also hear that you are, is it true that you're retiring?
That is absolutely correct. After 33 years of service in San Francisco Unified School District and San Francisco Public Schools, I have decided that my time has ran up in public and serving the students and families in public schools in San Francisco, along with my children. However, there will be another Mr. Stewart. I do have my youngest son, who is an 8th grade math teacher teaching at James Dimon right now in his first year completed, and would love to be able to stay here and support you guys as long as he could. He's also a former student of San Francisco Unified School District. And so there will be another Mr. Stewart, just won't be this Mr. Stewart.
Right, well, I want to thank you personally for your service for the district for so many years, and having you born and bred and went through our school system. So just want to thank you for all your service. I really appreciate it on behalf of the board. And I know the teacher in question, Ms. Marisa and Zamora, and so I'm really thankful that you're bringing this forward to the board to celebrate her brief life with us, and that the community has backed this this renaming of the garden, and it goes along well with the actual remodeling of the site, which is absolutely beautiful. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for your service here to the district. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the effort of the community. I personally am opposed to naming things after people, which is a very difficult thing to, I think, say in this moment. So I think for me, this isn't something that I can support in principle, can't support in principle, but definitely support the spirit behind it and the intention of lifting up someone who lost their life to cancer, especially a young person. Definitely support the effort, but just won't be voting to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Being new, I would like to understand the process by which naming of things come. I
It's-
apologize, I don't know.
What is referenced in the resolution itself? That
There's
a board,
policy 7310?
yes, so there's a board policy or district policy that has to be adhered to when renaming either a site or a part of a site, in this case, a garden. And Mr. Stewart referenced Louise Jones' renaming of the library at Carver. She was the long-term principal at that site for many years. And this comes to the board relatively often in terms of renaming gymnasiums, like there's a gymnasium renaming coming up. And the district has a protocol that's followed, and they're following the protocol right now.
And this process.
Yeah.
Then I actually, just a technical point, I see in page 2 of the resolution, the second whereas clause. It says, whereas Zamora Moon story can be shared through the beauty of the Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy Elementary School Garden and serves as a thoughtfully for advocating for funding for pediatric cancers. That is not grammatically, or I don't understand what it says. Serves as a thoughtfully something?
I would think, because I didn't type that thoughtfully part in, but I did put in thoughtful for advocating for funding for the pediatric cancers, especially DIPG. So I think the word is thoughtful. Thoughtful way. Yes. Thank you.
So it should be, and serves as a thoughtful way for advocating for funding. And
That-
DIPG stands for?
That's referenced earlier in the resolution. It's diffuse intrinsic pontine glomus, or DIPG. It's the third to the last whereas. This won't be the first typo or error in grammar that you find today in the resolutions. So I'll move to this for a positive recommendation for the full board to consider tomorrow's meeting. And you can second, and then we'll have a quorum to move it if you want, or if you don't, then it won't move positively to the full board.
I still have a couple of questions in general for how many such types of names do we have across the district? Like, how many schools have something named after somebody?
3,252. No, I have no idea. A lot, though, I would say.
Is it, so it's typical?
It's a
maybe-
Yeah.
common practice.
So for example, we renamed a school after Mayor Lee and his wife recently, so it happens all the time.
Yeah,
Gordon
no,
Lau,
I've-
Yickwo.
Right, not school per se, but like things within school, like this is a, gymnasium, a garden. Is that also very typical? Do we have, almost every school has something like that, or?
No,
I've been,
Don't tell me.
I don't know the exact number, but I would just say pre-pandemic, I feel like about 3 of these have happened a year since I've been here, that have actually moved forward. So it is like it is not a common, but it is a regular occurrence.
And would you say a majority or a minority of
I have
our schools have
really
something?
No idea, Commissioner, sorry. Outside of the board resolutions, these kinds of actions are not annotated or tracked anywhere else to my knowledge by the district. So except for the resolutions themselves, so we need to do a research project to go back through resolutions and see how many were related
I'd
to
like
renaming.
to ask Commissioner Bogus more about the reason of why you're opposed. Am I allowed to do that?
I don't have the answer, but I can answer. Yeah. No, I mean, I think when I first got on the board, one of the first votes that I took was in regards to the school renaming situation. And a lot of my stance on that was just being about not naming things after people and just really finding other ways to kind of honor folks besides naming buildings or kind of areas after them. So that's just more of kind of like a personal stance more than it is about like this particular proposal.
Thank you. All right, so Commissioner Sanchez, you move.
Yes, I move this for positive recommendation to the full Board of Education.
I will second it, so that means it goes forward with
Yes,
a recommendation,
a positive recommendation.
positive recommendation.
Yeah, so it's noted by Ms. Lanoff, and it'll be on the agenda for tomorrow. And so it's a 2-1.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so the administrative regulation says that for the advisory committee to be able to recommend a name to the board, at least 3/4 of all advisory committee members must vote to recommend the name. And so 2/3.
We're 2/3, which means
We're
we're
not
short
an
of 2/3.
advisory committee.
I'm sorry.
We are a committee. of the
You're a,
Education.
yes.
Yeah.
Past practice has been it's a majority.
Mhm.
Okay, are we done with this item? Okay, all right, sorry about that. First time. All right, well, next time, thank you, Principal. I think you said yes, and thank you for your service. Enjoy your retirement. Yes. All right, the next item on our agenda is B2. Another resolution, I guess 222-22SP5. Somebody else's mic is on. Can you turn off? Hello? Oh, no? All right. Okay, superintendent's proposal in support of naming the gym at Claire Lilienthal after Karen D. Hadley. Do we have any
Commissioners, we're
comments?
joined tonight by Commissioners.
So public comments? Please.
I don't need to read a whole.
I have been my name is Danielle Anderson. I've been a teacher at Francisco Middle School for the last 35 years. And I first met Karen Hadley at Claire Lilienthal 22 years ago when she first started there. My own children went to Claire Lilienthal and had Karen as a teacher. Karen was Claire Lilienthal. She put her heart and soul into that school. She was the only PE teacher they had there until she passed away a couple of years ago in December. And she was Teacher of the Year. She got the Positive Coaching Alliance Award. You can read the resolution that I wrote. And she was just an unbelievable person. She worked with many student teachers in San Francisco, and now they've all got jobs teaching PE in San Francisco. And I really want to make this happen. I want the gym named after her. The gym did not have a name. She was the person that got the gym at Claire Lilienthal. It didn't have a gym for all these years, so they finally built a gym there, and she was a big part of that. And I want the gym named after Karen. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you. And I also sent some of you a letter that I had initially sent to the superintendent. I think you got it from me, that just listed all the reasons and everything that Karen has done for this school district. So thank you.
Thank you. We have another.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jason Marwan Hanan. I'm the Assistant Superintendent charged with serving and supporting, among other schools, Claire Lilienthal K-8 school. So you've heard from a member of our San Francisco Unified School District community, and just to offer a little additional context, many of the details that were shared by our colleague, Ms. Anderson, are outlined in the superintendent's proposal. Just to read it into the record for background purposes, the Claire Lilienthal school community abided by the facilities naming policy 7310 and is requesting a positive recommendation for the naming of the school's gymnasium. The Claire Lilienthal community would like to name their gymnasium after the late Karen D. Hadley, who taught physical education at Claire Lilienthal from 1998 to 2019. She was widely recognized for her teaching talent and her devotion to her students, winning several awards along the way. Ms. Hadley was essential in having the gymnasium constructed as well. The school site council voted to support the name change back in January of 2022. The item was also referred to the Buildings and Grounds Committee for recommendation after introduction to the Board of Education.
Thank you very much. Commissioner? Oh, we know what Kevin's comment is. I don't really have any comments, but what do we do? You want to move?
Unless you have any comments, I'll move for a positive recommendation for the full board.
I will second that. Thank you, Jason. Deborah, you're good? Okay, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, C1, status update of the implementation of the 2016 general obligation bond.
Commissioners, tonight, Lucinia Berry, our Bond Program Director, will be providing the presentation.
Thank you, Dawn. Good evening, Commissioners. I do have a presentation this evening that incorporates some of your comments from last month. So both an update and also a request for feedback on the information that we're presenting. Go ahead and click through. Here's just an overview of what we're going to talk about this evening. Just keep moving, please. One more. We do have a brief update on our bond sale, which was successful and will close at the end of this month, May 26th, in just a few days. A note to the commissioners here that our bond rating from S&P did improve this round, which is good news, and credited in large part to the Board of Education for your recent actions around balancing the budget and moving past the recall process. So that's good news. In terms of an update on our active construction projects, here's a picture of Thurgood Marshall, the progress photo that actually looks quite a bit different from this now. We have, sorry, go back. We have, you can see on the far left of the photo, some of the new windows that they look whiter, kind of white and silvery on the far side, and then the scaffolding that has gone up on the other side as we work to switch phases and replace all of the rest of the windows here. The next slide is the same slide as last month, a reference slide for you to know which projects are still under construction or design. The projects under construction are the ones in the solid blue band that proceed after today. The ones in orange, again, same as last month, are the ones that are still in closeout. So as board members, you might see actions related to these come across the board calendar, but they are not actively under construction. The next slide has a photo here also of Thurgood Marshall, the CTE kitchen, which is past here already, but is kind of the crown jewel of this project, a full service commercial kitchen for our students to really get immersive experience in restaurant work. There are substantive updates on all of our five active construction projects here. Really the highlights being that George Washington and Marina are very much finishing construction. Hillcrest, the new building project, is underway. The foundation is being poured this week and then gets seriously under construction as soon as summer break starts next week. Thurgood Marshall, we have changed major phases and we'll be replacing all the rest of those windows this summer. And AP Giannini, we are getting ready to leave the site, moving the interim housing off and finishing the classroom work there. So this is an update from last month. As we committed, we'll be bringing kind of major cost centers that the bond program is spending through this committee so you guys can see it all in one place. The major contracts that went through the board in April, the biggest one being the $2.95 million one for our program policy and design partners in AECOM. They do all of the program management support for the bond program, and this modification brought them through February of 2023, which is the anticipated start, hopefully, of the next bond, if the voters pass it. The other three on this list are construction modifications for active construction projects, which we'll also talk about on the next slide. In terms of bond program expenditures, in April, you can see here pretty lopsided numbers. Construction was the major cash flow for us, which makes sense because we are in active construction on 5 large projects. And then construction management, which also, of course, supports construction. And then in the next one, this was in response to a request from this committee last month to see the change orders that came through the board in April. So here are the change orders that were approved by the board, specific to mostly the projects under construction. As I said before, because we are at the tail end of some projects, you will see final change orders for several projects, which is the case here with Claire Lilienthal and Sheridan both. Last month, we started bringing to you a monthly project highlight. This month is Garfield Elementary, which is a 2016 bond project, of course, completed in 2 phases. First, the demo, which is a full gut demolition of this, and then renovation of the building. This school was relocated in its entirety to the Sarah B. Cooper site during construction to allow this to happen quickly and with less phasing. This is an example of a curb-to-curb project where we really tried to take on every single piece of scope that we could fit in the budget. The next slide has a picture of the gut renovation. You can see here that we removed all of the walls and really did a full, complete change of this property. The construction budget for this project was just shy of $15 million. This is the redone play yard surfacing, and you can see the new windows and some of the shade structures that were added to the building on this facade. You can see here pretty much the building in its entirety, the new tot lot out there, the new play structure out there in the background. And then that's great. And then here's some before and after photos of the main hallway. We were able to open up a lot more natural light into the building, change the flooring and the color scheme. Really dramatic change here. The next one is before and after of the library, also a dramatic improvement. And then the next one of the multi-purpose room, which now opens up into that corridor there, and allowing kind of a flow of indoor-outdoor space, which is something we're looking to repeat in other projects. And then here's a typical classroom. You can see the lighting improvement really also changing the way it really feels inside this classroom. And now we're going to talk a little bit about performance metrics, also responsive to some things that this committee requested last month. One thing you were interested in was a comparison of how we're doing with bids when we receive construction bids, how close they are to the estimates that we had. So on this slide, here's one way to look at it, looking both on the left side in kind of a bar format of CD estimate, construction drawing estimate, our final estimate before we go to bid compared to the actual bid. And then on the right side, another way of looking at that, just kind of where you can see the percentage change between the bid and the estimate. Go ahead to the next one. Another one you asked for, sort of similar to two different ways of looking at the information for project schedule. On the left side, the duration of the contract at signature, and then the actual duration, which means when we were able to occupy the building. On the right side, again, a percentage change of schedule versus contracted schedule, and then there is a reason code in there for you to review at your leisure why the schedule might be different from what it was at contract. And that is it for this month.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Do we have any public comments on this presentation? Please.
Thank you. How much time?
2 minutes, if you would.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, hi everyone. This is Supriya here talking about outdoor learning, my favorite topic. I always have a bit of a tension about what to talk about when I come up here, and today I've been trying to decide between action and accountability because we have seen very little action, and we really, really need accountability. So I decided to try to talk a little bit about both of those. I think it's really important to note that we have been almost 2 years now, actually more than 2 years into this pandemic. Outdoor learning was always one of the cheapest, most effective ways to help our kids get back to school. That unfortunately didn't happen. It continued to be a wonderful way to help with our children's mental health, social emotional learning, learning loss, academic recovery, tons of things. And still, despite the board having taken the action of repurposing some bond funds to be used, nothing has been done at any of the sites to advance that. And it's not for lack of money. We know that the bonds, bond has been sold and so forth, but money has been found for other purposes, including for BVHM and for Mission Bay. And I don't begrudge those projects that money, but I do think it is grossly unfair and inappropriate not to have been helping the students throughout our district to improve their mental health and help recover from all of the terrible stresses and losses that they have suffered over the course of a year and a half for many of them of distance learning, excuse me. I think, and I would note now, we're at the end of the school year. We were told back in December that November, December weren't good times to plan because people were going on to holiday. And we were told previously that things would happen in the winter and then in the spring, and they didn't. And then we were told there'd be an application process. And when I checked with our principal at our most recent PTA meeting, he hadn't heard anything about that, and nor had anyone else. So I know nothing seems to be happening that needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, commissioners?
I really appreciate the presentation and the added information that was requested. Just one question on Hillcrest. I think you mentioned it before, maybe I forgot. It's a new building. Can you just describe what that building is and what it's used for? Was it replacing portables? And it's not taking up the space of those portables?
Yeah, exactly. So at Hillcrest, the new building is 4 classroom spaces and the associated restroom core that goes with them. And it is, yeah, the portables that were there have been removed, and that's the footprint that they're in.
Thank you. And just, it has come up before, Chair Chu, that around our portables in our schools, not every school has them, but a lot of them do. And you might, I'd love it if you put it on a future agenda to just have a list of what schools have portables and where we're at and trying to replace them, because they are substandard spaces in general in terms of for learning environment, and oftentimes they take up space that's, for example, at Chavez Elementary, there are 4, and they're not only unappetizing to look at, but they're just not really good spaces for students to learn in. So I think, and then in terms of moving forward with future bonds, if we so choose in future sites that are chosen to be on a future bond, that we could ameliorate those portable situations, just as we are doing at Hillcrest right now.
Were they supposed to be temporary and then became permanent?
Well, there's a misnomer. We call them portables or temporary buildings, but they oftentimes become permanent. And oftentimes it's because school size has grown. But when school size is contracted, they remain oftentimes, and then they take up valuable space for outdoor learning, for example.
Noted, thank you. All right, I have some questions. As Dawn and Zinnia know. Just some clarifications. On page 6, which is the page 6, is that active projects list? For the, I know that later on one of those pages had comparison of contracted time and the actual time of the project, so that's great. But I noticed also that for the ongoing projects, it's all the same. It's because you don't have an actual completion date yet. So just want to know, for those ongoing projects, are they on track for when they're supposed to be finished?
Commissioner, we work with the Board of Education and with our stakeholders to develop the actual schedule. So because we haven't identified specific projects in the ongoing programs, we don't have schedules for them yet. For example, for outdoor learning, we actually have circulated an application to principals in the school community. We then hope to be able to select projects at the start of the summer. And then once we select, projects and scope them, then we can publish schedules and budgets associated with those projects. Same thing for site security. For Buena Vista Horace Mann, we are on track. I want to compliment the efforts of Ms. Berry and her team in helping us make steady progress. And Mission Bay, through something short of a miracle, in my opinion, is also still on schedule for an August 2025 opening if we can get the approvals necessary in June. So I feel like we actually are making very good track on schedule, on track, and making progress across all of those the different programs.
Thank you. I was actually specifically going to ask about, you mentioned at the bottom of page 6, you mentioned BVHM and Mission Bay are on schedule. I'm inquiring about the the three above that. The Thurgood Marshall, the AP Giannini, and the Hillcrest that are still ongoing, are they on track to finish when they're supposed to?
The Hillcrest new building is on schedule. AP Giannini is tracking a few months behind, and Thurgood Marshall has had significant schedule delays due to supply chain issues related to the glass curtain wall. You can see in that building in that it's entirely glass on two sides, and we were unable to source those parts for pretty much the entire pandemic, and so it is significantly behind schedule for that reason.
I was actually there this morning at 9 o'clock at Thurgood Marshall. I saw that for myself. So actually on the page 21, when you displayed the project schedules, the plan versus the Thurgood Marshall's, it's the same. And then Hillcrest is also plan and schedule is the same. So I was wondering if they're really the same. And it sounds like they are behind schedule.
Right, and they're not shown here because we haven't actually reached the milestone of beneficial occupancy as a result of the building yet, so we don't have a comparison. But that's a good point. It is misleading the way that it's presented here, so we should at least flag that so that.
Yeah,
it's obvious.
somehow make some change on page 21 so that you can flag, even for the interim ones, whether they're on track for those interim milestones. That'd be great. Otherwise, it is a bit misleading. Thank you. And then on page 8, I wonder the contracts, I seem to remember somewhere from my CBOC days that, are we supposed to hire local contractors? Or I forgot the name. Is it the local or local hire? Do we still have that requirement?
So the bond program doesn't have a specific local hire percentage requirement, but most of our projects do operate under SFUSD's project labor agreement, which is a negotiated agreement with labor that happened, in this case, in the inception of the bond program, where we negotiated with the construction trades around percentages both for organized labor and including a local hire attainment goal. And so that's the way that our construction program is done, very different from, say, a public works project for the city.
So if I understand what you said, a percentage of our contractors need to be local hires? You just
Really of the
may not.
subcontractors that the primes would hire. We have more of our prime contractors, it's more qualifications based because we want them to have the capacity to produce the size of projects that we're putting through in the bond program.
Understand. So then the subcontractors, we do have some sort of target for local hires? Is that how it works?
Consistent with the PLA, and I think if we wanted to have a broader conversation on the PLA, that's probably an agenda item in itself.
The project labor agreement is in some respects stricter than what the city has, and in other respects broader and more vague. So we should, I think, agendize this for a future conversation. We can explain the difference between the city policies, which don't apply to SFUSD as a state agency, and then the independent agreement that SFUSD, entered into with labor unions around the project labor agreement.
And yes, let's put that in a future agenda and maybe track how we are doing with that. If it's X percentage, are we at that X percentage? Great, thank you. And then page 9, these change orders, page 9, are they under or over budget or for the current phase? Meaning we have these change orders for APG, Hillcrest.
So when they come to the Board of Education as a change order, for the way that we currently do budgeting in the bond program, that does mean that they have exceeded the contract value. The way that the bond program budgets, we do typically hold an allocation for a project that is higher than the contract value for contingency, right? Wanting to make sure that we have sufficient funds in the bond program to finish projects. But these do represent, you would see at the board a percentage that goes along with it that's indicative of how much over the original contract budget we are tracking. And so one thing we were talking about as we were putting this slide together was the degree, like the amount of information you would want to see in future meetings, whether you would want to see, what percentage these things reflect, or what percentage has been approved already by the board. There's lots of different ways to report this kind of data.
I do remember seeing that on the regular agenda for contract approvals and change orders. If you could just reproduce the same information on here, that would be sufficient. Since you already have it, just put it in here somehow. And actually on page 20, I think that's an excellent slide. Thank you very much for putting that together. Only suggestion is to add the actuals. You got the bids compared to the estimates, at least for the ones that have finished, if you could just add the actuals. And I love those reason codes. Thank you very much. Excellent. And what is pandemic related?
So during the pandemic, there were lots of impacts to construction. One was work stoppage, so just loss of time, because in the beginning of the pandemic, all construction sites were closed because of the number of people and the proximity. Following when construction sites were allowed to reopen, which was generally in the timing of essential services. I'm already forgetting the vocabulary of the pandemic. It's crazy. And when essential workers were returned back to work, many construction sites were reopened, but with fewer numbers, with social distancing requirements, which of course to us is dollar signs. And then also with lots of different compliance requirements, which meant that there wasn't the same pool of workers. So there's labor costs associated with that. And then on top of that, we saw, of course, a supply chain delay where we weren't able to procure what's the word? Materials, thank you. We weren't able to procure the materials for the
glad I'm not
projects,
the only
or
one.
lots of delays on that. And so so those are all of those delays add up to change orders for us in the long run.
Great, thank you. I think it's on page, when you mentioned that students were moved to a completely different site during I think it's page 11 for that project, Garfield Elementary, right? Right. When do we make that, or how do we make that decision? Because Thurgood Marshall, I don't think he moved any students out. And other schools, I think they didn't move students out. So when do you, how do you make that decision?
Commissioner, it's a great question, and one that's very relevant to the program. Because we have a lack of what's called swing spaces, meaning sites like Sarah Cooper that are functional but abandoned, right? For an academic feature, which allows us to place, basically move a school in while we're doing construction on their site. We often have to think very carefully about how we phase the construction of our projects. And this is often what leads to someone's first installation of portables, is that while we are under construction at the site, we will put, for example, George Washington High School, we put a series of portables out at that site. We put them on the football fields, we put them on the schoolyards. And that allows us to keep the school as much as possible at the site while we're doing construction. In some cases, there are instances where we cannot do that, where the site is so constrained that there is no space to erect temporary quarters, and in which case then we have to look for a swing space. So that is, worked out actually while we're in design on a project and thinking about how we would construct, what the construction sequence will be. And it's a challenging dimension of managing a school construction program.
I was wondering, because when you move students out,
Yeah.
that could mean that you can move on the construction faster.
That is correct, and
So
it has
that might
been,
save us money. at some
it
point.
does, and it's been a long discussed ask since I've been at the district, from my staff asking me to magically produce additional swing sites so that we can accomplish that very same goal. Unfortunately, they are hard to come by, and even Sarah B. Cooper, which has real advantages, is located, north, I believe, northeast side of town and doesn't make it accessible to other sites easily. So those are also dimensions that have to be thought through. So it would, if we had swing sites that were geographically distributed across the city, it would allow us to be faster in construction. But there are also real concerns, I think, from parents in the school community that also need to be addressed around the disruption that it might cause to move sites.
Maybe it would result in some transportation costs or something.
Yeah.
Like bus everybody to a different school and bus everybody back.
This is why we don't move every school into Sarah B. Cooper on a regular basis, right? Because the disruption to having to go from all the way on the southeast or the western side of the city to Sarah B. Cooper, that's like a 45-minute journey, right? During rush, when there's a lot of traffic in the morning. So those are the considerations that we weigh.
Great, thank you. Lastly, thank you very much for incorporating feedback from last time into much of this presentation. Can you also add the reallocated projects, the $100 million? Because it is also part of the 2016 bond, so kind of include that update as a additional slide or something, so that
Sure.
we know where we are, a
Happy
summary.
to. Mhm.
And then also, because there's a capital assessments project going on, maybe just a quick update on that, because I think we're coming up to almost done, right?
Well, it's very steady progress. In June, we are going to be done by the end of August with all buildings. But by the end of June, we will have a very healthy cross-section of data and definitely have completed all of our southeastern sites, which is where we started. We started in the southeast and are moving out across the city. So there will be a lot of interesting data to report on in August when we come back.
Okay, yeah, so when we have regular updates, just like maybe one blurb to tell us where that is until it's done. Okay. I think that little one has a comment. Okay, anything else, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. All right, thank you, Dawn and Lucinia, for that. Our next item is the Mission Bay School update.
Commissioner, I do believe we have a couple of folks here tonight for public comment, including one student who would like to make public comment. Would you like to take public comment first, or are we going to do it at the end of the presentation?
Why don't we, I think that student needed to go home study for finals. Let's have the student come and make a public comment first.
Hello? Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is William Holder Soto. I'm a junior at Mission High School. I had the privilege of being one of 11 student ambassadors that took part in the Mission Bay Hub pilot program. I should be studying for finals right now, but this is more important to me, and I just wanted to let you all know about the work we did in the past year. Me and other students from underrepresented backgrounds worked at the Mission Bay at various locations to imagine the school as it could stand in the future. We collaborated with teachers, counselors, and students at UCSF to create a curriculum that genuinely excites us. Us working on site and collaborating with UCSF as well as the Chase Center mirrored what we believe the future school will accomplish, providing students with unique access to industry lab equipment, scientists, and a campus that breeds creativity and passion. In designing the school, we pictured a place where students go to decide their own curriculums, learn from each other, and inspire generations to come. I personally have never seen an opportunity like this for BIPOC communities where creativeness is allowed, boldness is expected, and passion is key. I ask that you support the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public? I think we have one in the back. Oh. Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Bruce Agid. I'm a board member of the South Beach Rincon Mission Bay Neighborhood Association and the lead for the Mission Bay Elementary School Steering Committee. As a reminder, our steering committee is made up of community leaders and residents and representatives from both market rate and affordable housing units. The affordable housing providers in the area are Mission Housing, Mercy Housing, TNDC, and CCDC. After many years of advocacy, the community is ecstatic to see SFUSD staff bring these final approvals forward. This has been a long journey. As you know, the 1998 Mission Bay redevelopment plan, in the plan is a plot of land that was set aside for this elementary school. Today, approximately 90% of the Mission Bay housing has been completed, 6,400 units of housing with approximately 30% of the units affordable housing, and the school will also provide needed capacity for families living in the greater eastern part of the city, which has experienced significant growth over the past 20 years, with additional growth planned for the next 10. From the Trans-Bay District in the north to Dogpatch and Potrero Hill in the south, totaling 17,000 units of housing with 7,000 more planned. And sadly, to this point, no new public schools. As far as the adoption of the statement of overriding considerations for particulate found that cannot be fully mitigated, first, those of us who live in the eastern part of the city are aware of the air quality conditions. We know the district designed the school to mitigate this item as much as possible. And great news, with Caltrain electrification set to start up in 2024, 75% of the fleet contributing to a significant portion of this particulate will be replaced with electric trains. To wrap, we have a tremendous amount of community support. In fact, we started a change.org petition less than a month ago and already have over 600 signatures. Again, we appreciate your support and ask you to move these final approvals forward so the district can start construction of this much needed school and have the doors open by August 2025. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next.
Hi there, I'm Annie, and I just want to give provide a voice in support of building the school from two perspectives that I think are relevant. So one is as a parent of two young kids, one of whom we've kept mostly quiet so far, and another is someone who might be kind of on the flip side of what you heard from the student. I didn't catch his name because I was trying to keep Joe quiet. But I work in industry. I'm an acoustics engineer, and so I've participated in the past in a program that might resemble something like the Linked Learning Hub, and just want to say I think it's beneficial and desired from both sides. From the student's perspective, they get exposure to fields and potential career opportunities they otherwise wouldn't know about, and from someone in the industry side, we get to expose these students and have access to a much more diverse, dynamic potential future employees. So as a concrete example, we hosted an engineering technology camp, a 2-week immersive program where we have students come and learn about like the iPhones or the cameras in your iPhone, the touch sensors, et cetera. And definitely like a wonderful experience on both sides. So from that perspective, I think it's a really powerful and compelling reason for families to enroll and stay in the SFUSD system. And then as a parent, I think just in terms of this location specifically, Mission Bay is a really compelling place for families. You can imagine a family coming, you have a high schooler in the Linked Learning Hub, and then you also have maybe a middle schooler and you have the soccer fields right there, you have Spark Social, you have the Mission Bay Playground. We spend an inordinate amount of our time there. And so I think it's a really compelling place for families to come and a reason for them to enroll and stay in the SFUSD system. Thanks so much.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is J.R. Epler. I'm president of the Potrero Boosters Neighborhood Association. I'm also the father of the rising second grader there in the back that attends Daniel Webster Elementary School. And we are very lucky to be in Daniel Webster Elementary School because if you look at the enrollment numbers in a time of declining enrollment, Daniel Webster is oversubscribed. So is the other school in our neighborhood, Star King Elementary. These are schools that draw across not just Potrero Hill, note neither of them are named Potrero Hill Elementary, but draw from the entire eastern side. Mission Bay School is a little bit of a misnomer as well. I'm sure it'll take on a different name because it is not just a school for Mission Bay, even though it could be because of the large number of families that moved into the area despite what planners thought. Well, the planners have a better idea now, and as Bruce mentioned, we have 17,000 units of residential development that have either recently come online or are coming online in the next decade. And this gives us an opportunity to put a school where the kids are going to be. We got lucky in this chance. 25 years ago with the Mission Bay plan, someone looked at the land and said, you know, we're going to need an elementary school here. We don't have that for a lot of the things that make for a complete neighborhood, but we have the opportunity to have a more complete neighborhood by putting this elementary school where the families are going to be. Even if you think that right now the housing stock is going towards young people without kids, we know that they eventually get together and then the kids start coming. And so let's have an opportunity to meet the demand where it is now and where it's going to be in the future and finish the approvals for the Mission Bay School. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm glad to be here and glad to have the opportunity to speak to you for a second. My name is Dr. Harvey Brody. I became aware of this project, I guess I'm the only one in the room that could say this, at its inception. Started as a young faculty member at UCSF, and many things have changed in the past 25 or so years. Well, first of all, I'm no longer young, that's one thing. We've had different chancellors, we've had different mayors, we've had different members of the board, Board of Education, Board of Supervisors. But one thing that hasn't changed, it was expressed so clearly by the young student who we heard a few minutes ago, the tremendous opportunity and synergism that can exist between UCSF, City and County of San Francisco, and the school district. There are opportunities there that are absolutely amazing. That's been the part that's excited me from all these years. The university is literally a gold mine of resources, whether you consider human resources or the labs, the physical opportunities, the chance for interaction with a very diverse group of faculty members and hopefully a very diverse group of students. So I just wanted to share my excitement with you and wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you.
Down a little bit. Hi, Commissioners. Good evening. My name is Gloria Lee. I am a parent that lives in the Mission Bay School area. I serve on the TJPA and the Trans Bay Citizen Advisory Committee, and I am a co-founder of the Trans Bay Parents Group, representing parents in the East Cut, Rincon Hill, South Beach, and the Embarcadero area. I'm here tonight to ask you to support and vote to approve the Mission Bay School project. The project is fully funded and ready to go, and the Mission Bay Soma area have been requesting a school for over a decade. The immediate area is growing quickly, and there are many young families like my own looking for infrastructure to support our growth and for our kids to grow into. Kids should not have to travel across the city for an education, and it should be in their community. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening, Commissioners. My name is Toby Levine, and I'm also a resident of Mission Bay. I'm also one of your retired school teachers, 30 years with the district at Martin Luther King, Horace Mann, and so forth. So from the point of view of a teacher who is living in Mission Bay, this is a great opportunity for the school district to provide a great opportunity for the young people who are living there and who will continue to live there because it is a wonderful neighborhood. And then, of course, it's got easy access to all the surrounding neighborhoods. It's truly a win-win. So thanks to the staff for the work they've done, and let's finish it. Thank you.
My name is Chris Gallo. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm a resident in Mission Bay. My relation to this bond actually goes back to prior to being a resident, I worked for Hilltop Securities, which was an underwriter on the 2016 Mission Bay project bond. When I was selling the bond to my clients, I talked about the growth in the area. I talked about the housing going up and the need for these various projects. My clients who purchased the bond were not only wanting to make money on the interest, but also to help the city. Where we stand now, I live in the district. I've seen the growth firsthand. I talked to residents and knowing I was going to speak tonight, and one of the positive feedback I received from the people was, for one, it's going to alleviate a lot of burden on the parents. That's valuable time that they do not have to spend transporting their kids to and from school. There's a sense of community from the children being able to walk to school to the local businesses that will have more business that might have gone to a different neighborhood where the school is, they'll be brought here. It may even sponsor some more growth in small businesses. From the children standpoint, the idea of going to a new school in your neighborhood is something that I walked to school as a kid. It's just a nice sense of community with your classmates that you can go, you have playtime after school. You don't have to make plans to hang out with your friends. You can hang out with your friends very easily. So that's why I encourage you to vote this through. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben. I'm a parent in Mission Bay. I was chasing a toddler around for a bit, and others will speak and have spoken, I think, more eloquently about the technical details, the tens of thousands of housing units. And what I just hoped I could provide tonight is the perspective of a dad who spends a lot of time in the sand pit at the Mission Bay Kids Park. And if any commissioner, and I'm sure you're supportive being on the Buildings and Grounds Committee, but if there are commissioners trying to get a better sense of what the community in this school might be like, I'd suggest just going there a little bit before lunch or after nap time. And you'll get a sense of what I see, which is an extraordinarily vibrant and diverse community of parents and kids trying to figure out where they're going to send their kids to school. Last weekend, Joe, the one running around in the back, played with two kids. One, her father is a professor at UCSF. He does research on a specific type of blood cancer. And the other was a 6-year-old whose parents had come to San Francisco from Kabul 2 years ago, having helped the United States while there, and they're now living in San Francisco in some of the 30% affordable housing. So we all have one question, which is where did the kids go in about 3 years? I know where they go right now. When I'm out walking the baby around in the morning, I see kids at 7 a.m. getting piled off to Muni. That's tough. It's tough on the parents. It's tough on the kids. And the prospect of something like this would be such an extraordinary boon for enrollment for the district and such a vibrant new pipeline of children that I just want to ask that you support it and perhaps come by. Apples and grapes and Cheerios are on me if you do. So, thank you.
Thank you all for your comments. Where is that playground, by the way? I want to go. No, seriously, I want to go. I will go.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's right off Longbridge Street. It's literally called the Mission Bay Kids Park, but it does draw from, I actually meet families there from Sacramento, Roseville, American Canyon who come in to see it. So Mission Bay Kids Park, you'll see it on Google Maps or Apple Maps if you want to do that, or a real map. So.
Got it, thank you. I don't know if real maps exist anymore. Great. Thank you very much, commissioners. Oh, actually, we need the presentation.
Commissioners Lisinia Barry will be sharing the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Don, and good evening again, commissioners. When I started here just in January, it was made very clear to me that by this group of public stakeholders that this project must be on my priority plate as soon as I began, which is the same time that we also lost our project manager to another position for this job. So I'm wearing two hats, both as the director of the bond program and also a project manager for Mission Bay in this presentation. But I'm going to run through, the community actually did a very nice job of introducing and providing some context around the school. So I'll go lighter on that to preserve our time here this evening. And also I know that Dawn has reached out to each of you to offer a more comprehensive briefing. And so to the extent you want to take us up on that, we can provide a lot more context there too. But tonight I'm really going to spend time talking about the approvals that are going to come before the board, so you have some context of what you will see in June, and then go into a little bit more depth on the environmental impact report, because that's an action that doesn't come up very often in front of the Board of Education. So just to start with some context on the school. You can go to the next slide. This is very much what many of the speakers said. We have a growing city. This site has been on deck for a long time as part of the Mission Bay redevelopment plan. And here we are on the cusp of being able to take that property from UCSF. The site is shown here and also a little bit more clearly on the next slide. Quite close to the kids' park, as was pointed out by the speakers, and at the end of kind of what is the big view corridor in Mission Bay, parallel to our lovely burgeoning houseboat community. The next slide shows a kind of bird's eye view of the planned school site with the buildings arranged in this L shape, fronting on to Owens and Nelson Rising, and the play yard taking up most of the site on the 6th Street side. Next slide, please. The program for the school is pre-K through 5th grade. As all of the curriculum component, there is dedicated space for educator professional development, both in standalone space and also integrated throughout the floor plan of the school itself. And then, as you heard from our speakers, there's also a STEM-focused linked learning hub for high school students. I do want to say that tonight, representing the district and those other functions, Carissa E. Finley, the Director of School Portfolio Planning, is also here, and Eric Rice, who's really the brain trust of the Linked Learning Hub, is here in the event you have questions for those folks in your comments. The project schedule is on the next slide. We do anticipate NTP, notice to proceed of the contract, in early June, after the board approves the requisite items. From there, we will, it is a design build contract, so there is additional design to be done as soon as that NTP is permitted. That would put us at the end of design in October, moving to construction documents for the next year to the end of November 23. And then meaningfully starting construction immediately thereafter, December 23, with a targeted opening of August 2025. There are a series of agreements, next slide please, there's a series of agreements that the board will need to take up in order for this project to become a reality. The first two are real estate agreements, the land disposition agreement and the easement agreement. This property was compelled to be transferred to the city or the school district by the Mission Bay Development Plan, so by the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency, when the Mission Bay Redevelopment Plan was written. Originally, as an interim step, the property was transferred to UCSF. I see a typo there. It's not USCF, it is UCSF. Sorry about that. And that transfer will happen. This will not be on the 1st of June hearing, though, because of a technical issue, which we can discuss further in a briefing related to the final map, the mapping process that the city has to do for us. The second agreement, which will come before you in June, is compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. We have prepared an EIR for this site because of a significant impact to air quality, which I'll talk about in a few slides. The board will also be required to adopt a resolution of site suitability. There is a list of site suitability criteria in the California ed code, and we have prepared a findings document and also a background document that explains how the site would meet all of those findings that will come before the board. And the last major approval in June is the design build contract itself, which is the binding agreement between SFUSD and the design build entity, which we are in negotiations with now, completing negotiations with now for the design, all of the regulatory approvals, the remediation of the site, all the soils work, and then ultimately the construction of the project. There are future approvals that will come before the Board of Education as well. The site approval, which will include the educational specification, which will happen sometime later this year when the design is complete. And also what's listed here is the play yard reimbursement agreement, which is another agreement that's compelled by the redevelopment agency, which essentially the redevelopment agency will pay us back for the cost of the play yard. So just a bit of a deeper dive into CEQA, and again, we can pick this up more thoroughly in a briefing. But the purpose of CEQA, sometimes people think that CEQA is about environmental protection. And while it does discuss many environmental issues, really the purpose of CEQA is public disclosure of potential significant effects. And the word potential is really important because that helps us really understand that CEQA is intentionally conservative in the thresholds that it sets, because it wants to disclose when there is a potential, something that could potentially come out of the project that people should know about before making a decision. For projects specifically that have sensitive users, so in the case of SFUSD, these are our students, of course, the CEQA document also analyzes the impacts of the project to itself. So not just the project to the existing community, but also to itself. Erring again on the side of more public disclosure rather than less. Next slide. These are the subject areas that CEQA is required to analyze, and every time a discretionary project comes before any lead agency, in this case, the school district, these are required to be analyzed in an initial study. The initial study is basically a long checklist of items, and you go through and kind of analyze your project description for potential effects to each of these subject areas. In this project, air quality required additional study following the initial study. And it was determined to result in a significant impact for the purposes of CEQA. Next slide, please. Again, going back to the concept that CEQA is intentionally conservative, the CEQA analysis for air quality impacts, again, analyzing the project for impacts to itself, in this case, our students. The impacts to sensitive users is, we use the threshold set by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for particulate pollution, in this case, PM 2.5. They have set a very conservative threshold, which this project in the theoretical model that we're required to run for the environmental impact report, it does exceed that threshold, and therefore there is a significant impact in the EIR. However, we have also done data-driven, taken empirical data of the actual particulate concentrations in the area, and that we have not seen an exceedance in safe air quality particulate pollution in the last 3 years. And so using the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, we can deem this site safe for public health, including the health of children. Just for some context, and I think one of our speakers alluded to this as well, on the next slide, there's a map that shows the exposure zones in San Francisco and what the areas in San Francisco where we might expect this kind of finding to require a similar document if we were considering new school sites, really in any of these neighborhoods. And just for some context on what other health studies we did, next slide. CEQA also requires you to look at these 5 kind of major air pollutants that we know are associated with negative health outcomes. We also test for other toxic air contaminants such as asbestos and diesel, and there are no adverse findings for any of these disclosed in this study. Next slide. CEQA also requires that you attempt to mitigate when you identify significant impact. You have to see if you can do something about it to reduce the threshold, to reduce the impact to under the threshold. And so we have incorporated this one, which is essentially moving the play area. It used to be on the roof. We have moved it down to be shielded by the building. And we have also, there a requirement in the site design for vegetative barriers, particularly specifying vegetative barriers that reduce particulate pollution. But even with these additions to the project, changes to the project, we cannot reduce the impact to less than significant. And so when this happens, go to the next slide, please. We do have to prepare an EIR, which we have done. We also have to put that EIR out for public comment, which has been done last year. And then we have to respond to each comment that we receive and publish a final EIR, which is available on our website. So the Board of Education will see a series of approvals related to CEQA. The first one will be a resolution that says that CEQA has been adhered to appropriately and summarizes all of the actions and dates and everything that happened. And then there will be a CEQA findings exhibit. Exhibit 1 will be a CEQA findings. Exhibit 2 will be the statement of overriding considerations. And the statement of overriding considerations also referred to by one of our speakers, but basically says, yes, we as the decision-making body of this lead agency, we understand that this significant impact is being disclosed in the final EIR, and there are social and economic benefits of the project that outweigh that significant impact. And there is, of course, a rationale spelled out in the statement of overriding considerations to assist you in making that finding. And then the third exhibit to that is the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which basically all of the mitigation measures that the project is required to take on during construction and in advance of construction become part of the approval and then bind the contractor to comply with all of those things. So I know that's a lot. I'm gonna let that sit for a second, turn to something much more interesting. I'm gonna leave this narrative for you, and we're just gonna run through some pretty pictures. But you can read this narrative. This narrative is really about how we got to the design that we currently have from the design that was in the original request for proposals document from last year. And so these drawings do incorporate our design build entity partners design. Again, still under negotiation, and because the board hasn't approved it, they're not our actual partner yet, but these are their drawings. This would be the overall design of the school and the play yard. And one of the features, go to the next slide, is requested by the community through lots of processes, the community entrance for kind of a shared schoolyards weekend access. And so this is both a day and a nighttime rendering of that access point. There is a combination of different kinds of play spaces programmed for mission-based school, including some nature play, natural landscaping elements, lots of stormwater management also combined into that play space, and then more formal play yard striping and play structures. And then on the next slide, I wanted to touch on the Linked Learning Hub that you heard about from our speakers as well, which is a space for high school students from around the district to be able to have hands-on kind of immersive experience with STEM-aligned fields and leveraging the location of Mission Bay to really come to where our city's partners in these areas really already are. And so on the next couple of slides, there are some kind of renderings that are intended to kind of evoke the feeling. These are not actual renderings of the space. The space itself is not designed, but to evoke the feeling of what the Linked Learning Hub would be for our students. I think the key take homes here is really rooted in students as agents for their own curriculum development in the Linked Learning Hub, and then also in real learning, professional settings, things that mirror as closely as possible what students would actually see in a professional environment. And so with that, that's end for tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Commissioners, any questions?
Could you talk a little bit more about the enrollment numbers and the projections and how it kind of fits into kind of the overall portfolio of schools and kind of the under enrollment that we're seeing now?
Commissioner, it's an excellent question, and we've invited Carissa Yee Finley to join us tonight to share some of that information and context.
Hi, good evening. So do you mind just quickly summarizing the question again?
Yeah, I think if you could put into context, I guess, the reason it makes sense to open this school when we're currently kind of facing under enrollment, and the enrollment projections kind of show us getting back to where we were at maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Absolutely. So I think that the mission-based school answers both kind of a current challenge that is more kind of regional and local in this part of the city that you heard about from some of the community this evening, but also a long-term capacity shortage that we're facing, as even though we're looking at more recent declining enrollment, the overall trajectory of the city and the students' population, we anticipate that it will be one of growth. And we work regularly with not colleagues, but folks in the San Francisco Planning Department and other agencies to really look at the trend lines for housing, particularly the plans for affordable housing and below market rate housing, which is where we've been seeing more of new SFUSD students enrolling from. And so the long-term, and not even long-term, but kind of like the 10 to 15-year plans and beyond of San Francisco are a huge increase in housing, particularly with a focus on affordable housing to address, of course, our housing shortage in the city. And with that, a percentage of housing units and then new residents from those housing units are anticipated to be SFUSD, future SFUSD students. And so there's kind of the regional and local gaps of thinking about access and kind of the geographic distribution of our schools in the city, as well as that longer term growth. There's also the preparation as we shift to a zone-based student assignment system. And so right now, we basically have a system of citywide choice with some preferences and tiebreakers. But as we move to zones, proximity and the need to have sufficient capacity in more localized neighborhoods or regions of the city will become more important. So currently in San Francisco, our south of Market and southeast of San Francisco are where we see the greatest numbers of SFUSD students. And with the housing that's kind of in the pipeline and has been recently built, we'll continue to see those types of capacity deficits. And so if we're looking to create more, if we're looking to design a student assignment system around proximity and meeting capacity where students live, we'll really need to take those things into account, including the fact that within the current Daniel Webster attendance area boundary, That was designed in 2010, and a huge number, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but a huge number of housing and residents have come online since then. We have 22 general education seats for our kindergarten classroom each year there, because it is, we also have a popular Spanish immersion program. And so what that means is for that large geographic area where there's been kind of the most development in the city during that time, we're really facing a current shortage that's going to increase over time. So hopefully that kind of helps to explain both more of the localized issues as well as the longer term trends.
Commissioner, if I could also just add that long-term land use and capital, it's taken us, depending who you speak to and what timeline they start from, 10 to 15 years to get to this point in terms of the original conceptualization of the mission-based school. And that in land use in San Francisco, if you wait until the growth happens to find your property and build your school, you have missed your chance. And so we are buying properties and managing the district's portfolio of assets with an eye towards the 50 and 80-year and 100-year horizon. And so it is, in that long-term view, important and I think useful for us to have a school site in this neighborhood that will help us, hopefully, again, should the board move forward with student assignment policy, proposed changes, be responsive real time to the changes we'd like to make, rather than asking folks to wait longer.
No, thank you for that. And I would just love if you could include some of that in the presentation next time. I think it's just good context for folks to understand as we kind of deal with issues of under-enrollment and kind of how that impacts everything else. I have an additional question about air quality. I think kind of post the school being kind of built, just being so close to the freeway, being so close to Chase Center, being so close to AT&T Park or whatever it is called at the moment. How are we, I guess, monitoring air quality for students, like when they're going out to play? Is there a plan to do that or the capability to do that? Or is it actually not that much of a concern? I guess I just worry with the proximity to the freeway and the large venues that like the number of cars at a certain point in time could just be pumping out enough nasty toxins to like impact air quality enough in the air. But maybe that's me being a worrywart, I guess.
No, I mean, I think a lot of our work is to be professionally worried on the behalf of our constituents. And so I think the question around specific monitoring is one that we can contemplate as a school district about how and when we might want to tackle that in an outdoor schoolyard environment. Again, a lot of the data upon which the analysis is based off of certain metrics and readings gathered around the area, but they're not point specific to Mission Bay, right, to our schoolyard at certain times of the day. And so to the extent that the board is interested in that kind of post-project monitoring, we can talk about that. I would say that of the especially the PM 2.5 particulate that's been analyzed, a big driver of that is actually the diesel Caltrain that runs under the freeway, the elevated freeway that is over the space that will one day become a park that is across the street from the school. Caltrain right now is undergoing an electrification effort, and I believe the first train cars that will be electrified are supposed to come online next year, according to their existing schedule. And should that transition be complete, that will reduce a lot of the PM 2.5 particulate, or it's been a major driver of that. We would also like to hope and aspire that over time, cars themselves on the elevated freeway will slowly switch towards electrification, which will further reduce the impact and again, drivers of air pollution in the area, both at the street level near the park and also on the elevated freeway. It's also, I think, important to note that as we're modeling for CEQA purposes, we have to assume kind of most conservative scenarios, which includes like an assumption that basically kids are almost outside all day long, when in fact they are not, right? They have very specific periods of time that they are outside, and most of the time we are designing this building to have higher mechanical ventilation, unlike many of our most of our school buildings right now, that the side of the building that faces most of the traffic will actually have sealed windows, but there will be windows that can open on the other side of the building and are also intentionally, the layout of the school site is also intentionally designed to, again, maximize the distance between kids when they're outside and use the building itself as something of a barrier. So those are all design choices we've made to try and protect, or I should say reduce, the impacts of air pollution, which are experienced in various, again, you could see the air pollution, the APES zones, right, in much of the eastern side of the city. And also we hope with like vegetation plans and the like, trees also help to absorb some of that pollution. So we've taken a number of steps to mitigate those potential impacts. And but to the extent that the board wants us to explore a monitoring policy of some sort after the fact, that's something we can talk about.
Yeah, I don't want to direct you to do work as much as just just to have a clear understanding of like what our policy is and kind of how we gauge it. I just think knowing kind of the history of kind of the east and the south sides of the city and kind of the histories of environmental racism and pollution and really it not being checked and people just assuming it's okay, just figuring if we move forward, maybe not just for this school site, but I mean, I don't know, for schools close to freeways or other kind of major things that cause pollution like Caltrain sites with diesel trains, that we play a role in monitoring that and kind of actively tracking. In addition, I think if reasonable, I think if staff comes back and says that's an unnecessary cost or it's not reasonable because of what we've done up front to mitigate and to plan, I think that's fine too. But I think just having the clarity that we've taken the extra time to make that assessment from staff would make me feel extra better.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's great feedback.
Commissioner Bogus asked some of the questions I was going to ask. Just, is it accurate to say that in Soma proper, there's only one school, and that's Bessie Carmichael, K-8?
That's what I was going to say. When you said there's only one school, I was like, no, there's more than that. I thought you were including Mission Bay. I was like, well, there's
At
going
the
to be two.
moment, there's only
Yeah,
one.
at the moment, Bessie Carmichael is the school that I would identify as a Soma located school, but Ms. Finley might have anything else. That's right.
Well, then, but in terms of declining enrollment right now, do we know the enrollment at that school, at Bessie?
So I don't have the numbers directly in front of me.
Get your mic.
I don't have that number right in front of me. I can definitely get back to you as I look at the numbers, but we have been seeing kind of prior to the pandemic, overall in the district, a slight decline in enrollment. And then, of course, you've heard during the past 2 years, similar to communities in California and across the country, an even greater drop in enrollment. That drop has been seen in about 92% of our schools, or the broad majority. And there has been a range, so some experience big drops and some smaller. So I'll check back on Bessie, but I do know that the changes in enrollment have tended to correlate with kind of which schools are more or less requested in our enrollment process.
No, yeah, I mean, looking forward, if we do adopt the smaller zones for schools, I would imagine that would impact Bessie's enrollment as well as Mission Bay's. And I would imagine if that zone included Webster as well. We don't know what the zone's going to look like, but
right.
Exactly.
The current student assignment system designates Bessie Carmichael as a citywide school. So there is no kind of localized preference or tiebreaker for if you want to attend the school. And then the localized preference, or we call it the attendance area school in that area, serving that area, is Daniel Webster, which again has the 22 seats available in Gen Ed currently.
Yes. But the school as a whole is rather full, or do we know? I don't.
It has been full.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Actually, both commissioner asked the same question that I had in mind, which was the enrollment. Can you include some, whether it's a report, whatever report that you're referencing about the increase in enrollment? Because everything that we've seen so far is decrease in enrollment. So I'd like to know from what you're basing the increase from.
Absolutely, Commissioner. We post that online, and I will make sure it gets to you directly at sfusd.edu/enrollment projections. The last time we worked with demographers to commission an enrollment forecast report was just prior to the pandemic. So I think some of those assumptions do in fact need to be updated, of course. And we will be working to commission another one as well.
Okay, another question I have is, what is the capacity of the elementary school as well as the high school component of this site?
The elementary school is, I believe, 500 students. And the high school, the high school is not full-time attendance or instruction, and so I would defer to Mr. Rice to talk about the number of students it envisions serving.
Good evening, Commissioners. I think based on the space projections, what we were told is serving approximately 140 students at a time. Keep in mind, the model is meant to have multiple cohorts of students each day. So we would estimate a minimum of 280 if there were a full morning cohort and a full afternoon cohort, and that doesn't even take into account the evening activity and access, short-term access for elementary and middle school students that could be coming in for short-term projects, et cetera. But that baseline for the core high school program would be, we would estimate about 100, based on the current space projections, about 140 students at a time.
Thank you. And would be the feeder middle school?
Commissioner, I'm actually going to defer to Ms. E. Finley.
As the timeline for this school aligns, I guess the short answer is it's to be determined. The slightly longer answer is that the timeline for the school opening will align with our broader student assignment development work. And so as part of that work broadly, I think there will be a need to reassess the middle school feeder system, not necessarily as a policy, but making sure that the current setup still will work under the new elementary school zones. And then if I could just add to a note around the elementary school size. One thing that we did with this school, because we were designing from the ground up with kind of an understanding of modern learning standards and current school classroom ratios, we programmed the school size to be what we think of as like the most efficient and fiscally responsible school size. And so because in our K-3 grades, our target class size is 22. We have 3 classrooms each per grade. And then when you move into 4th and 5th grade, we have 2 classrooms each of 4th and 5th grade. So it ends up being 66 across each grade, K through 5, which you need the sufficient number of classrooms available on the campus in order to do that. And that's not something we were able to do at every campus. So it was important that we were able to program a really efficient school model at the site.
Just saying 66 times 6, roughly 400, but
including pre-K, TK, and SDCs.
Okay. That's a pretty sizable school. Will that be the biggest one out of our portfolio of elementary schools?
No. BVHM, all bigger.
Gordon J. Lau has around 700.
Pretty.
Okay, and I saw in the presentation somewhere that you had reduced the building mass, so it was supposed to be larger?
Commissioner, we reduced the building footprint, but not necessarily the classroom, the number of classrooms to serve students. So I'll ask Ms. Aberry to provide more details on that.
Yes, so this kind of gets into some of the details of the procurement process, but when the district originally released the request for proposals, there were two important features of that, well, many, but two that we should talk about right now. One is the basis of design, the programming document, and the other is the stipulated sum requirement, which at the time of the RFP was $90 million. So we were asking our potential proposers to fit the program into that cost bucket. And what we got during the proposal negotiation phase was a conversation by both of the leading proposers that those things were incongruous. And so during the proposal negotiation phase, much of it was dedicated to conversations with both proposing teams about how to value engineer, this is a phrase everybody loves, right? Reduce the program to fit the budget. And so what happened in this case, the narrative that we kind of skipped over on slide, let me find it for you, just so you can go back to it. 16 is a discussion about how ultimately the successful proposer was able to do that to still meet the overall goals of the school building in a smaller footprint and making some design changes that reduced the overall cost of the project.
Got it, thank you. What took so long since 1998?
Oh, land use in San Francisco, I think. There's been a long-term plan for the development of the Mission Bay neighborhood as a whole and the development area. So I think the school is one portion of that plan, and long anticipated and called out in the original development documents. I think UCSF has had its own hands full completing the rest of their development plan. And the district, I think, has had uneven capacity, I think, from a real estate and facilities perspective and a development perspective to pursue this particular project. When I arrived, then Supervisor Matt Haney, who had just left the Board of Education, where he was a supportive proponent of the project, I think we needed a broad coalition of sponsors to elevate and emphasize the importance of moving ahead with the project. And that was in direct response to the persistent ground organizing of our community partners to really insist that while the plan for growth was begun in 1998, the growth has really hit the ground in the past 5 to 10 years, right? So that's when we've seen this extraordinary build out. And I think it has brought the idea of a school to a new sense of urgency that it moved forward.
Thank you for that historical context. My last question is everything sounds great, especially the high school component. Thank you, Mr. Rice, for giving me a download of that just this morning. And we have lots of supporters. I would like to hear the non-supporters. What would their reason be?
Commissioner, I'm happy to say, although I'm hesitant to jinx myself, but at this time, as we completed the EIR, there were only 4 comment letters that were registered to comment on the EIR. Each of those comment letters was from a public agency who were sharing concerns, not so much about why the project should exist, but asking us for clarification of our plans and ways that we could address issues that were important to them. We believe we have responded to all of those comments that have been raised by other agencies. And I think at this point, there is broad support for the idea of a school itself. And most of the questions that I have heard are actually very consistent with the questions that the board has asked tonight itself. Around how does this project align with our current situation as a district? What does it help us with? What are the issues we need to take into account, and then how does this address our long-term needs? And so I hope that we have provided adequate answers to those questions, or at least valid data points to consider.
If I remember the 2016 bond documents, there was $100 million set aside for Mission Bay or Bayview, something like that. I forgot
And.
exactly the word. And
Not
Bayview.
or.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So does that mean Mission Bay is going forward and Bayview is not?
Commissioner, this was in October of 2021 when I petitioned the board, and the board approved the proposal to reallocate $100 million of 2016 GO bond funds. Part of that was $20 million for Southeast facility planning. The reason we moved forward with that recommendation is because at that time, again, we did not need to buy new land and build a brand new building on a new property in the Southeast. In the Southeast, we have a number of properties which are abandoned and should be rehabbed as our first step, and you'll be hearing more about that actually as we finish our Southeast planning process and this spring and summer. So I think in collaboration with Southeast, focused on cohort 3 instructional leadership, we've had a very thorough conversation since January about what our big moves need to be and how to think about Leola Havard and John McLaren, which are 2 big abandoned campuses. And when I say abandoned, I mean not in use for full-time elementary school, middle school, or high school instructional uses. Both John McLaren and Leola Havard have early education sites that are currently active, but the other uses are administrative. It is a big part of our capital condition assessment to look at all of those buildings and determine their condition, and then to line that up with our understanding of enrollment patterns to begin to sequence a series of investments in those existing properties to address the same issues that we've talked about are impacting Mission Bay. So again, what does it mean for changes in the student assignment policy? What does that mean for the Southeast? Which facilities need to be renovated and or potentially expanded? And secondly, as we look to long-term growth, how do we think about not just one campus, but investments across the various school sites of the Southeast to prepare us for that growth? So we are moving forward with planning for equivalent investment in the Southeast, but it's unlikely at this time to take the form of a land transfer or a land acquisition, and more focus on investments in our existing properties.
Great. Ed, is that $100 million enough for this project?
It's actually 115 now. So between we also, as part of that October 2021 reallocation, asked for $15 million more to put to the Mission Bay project. And I do feel that, again, if we stay on our schedule right now of our approvals in June and a subsequent land transfer, we are in great shape with respect to having the funds we need to complete the project.
I promise. One last question. When is the no turning back or no changes point? Meaning, what if for whatever reason, the Board of Education decides that funds need to be used for something else? When would we have to decide, or are we past that point already?
It's right about now. I think that you would want to make that decision before entering into a design build contract for the construction of the site, right? The estimate of the construction contract is entirely based on the scope of work that we have put out to bid, which is for a 500 student elementary school STEM learning lab, some professional development spaces, a schoolyard. And that scope of work is the basis of our contract. So if the board were to consider dramatic revisions to that scope of work, or when I say program, I mean the program, the architectural program of the space, we would need to have that information in short order. Should those changes be made after the award of contract, you would have to pay for them quite substantively, likely, in as a change order. to the contract. And then my $115 million estimate would no longer be true.
I would just say too, I think in my mind, like we've made the commitment to build the school, and we're in the process of kind of finalizing what the project looks like and how we kind of go about executing it. But I think in my mind, like we've kind of already committed to do this, and we're kind of on the path to see it through.
No more questions from me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our next steps are, we are awaiting feedback from the Board of Education on timing for either a special hearing or inclusion in the board's remaining 2 meetings, one or the other, so that we can bring the EIR for certification, as well as pursue the other action items that Ms. Berry outlined in the proposal. So we look forward to that feedback, and as soon as that is agendized, we will be moving full speed ahead.
Great, thank you very much. That concludes this one, and we have one last item, which is somewhat related to what we were just talking about, and that is the real estate and permits department and a tally of what we own.
Commissioners, tonight, this presentation, I'm joined by Ms. Elizabeth Lee, who's our director of our real estate team within the facilities division, and also Karen Sullivan, who's our executive director of facility and capital planning. And Ms. Lee will be presenting.
Thank you, Dawn. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Elizabeth Lee. I'm the manager for the Real Estate and Permit Office. I wanted to thank the Buildings and Grounds Committee for giving me the opportunity to share with you what my office does, and also to answer any of the questions that you may have. So for tonight's presentation, we're going to talk about what we do in our office, outline some of the performance matrix, some recent achievements, and then going forward, what the next steps are, and what are opportunities, and what are challenges. So real estate office, what do we do? So in alignment with the district's mission to support students, we provide, next slide please, sorry. We provide an equitable and financially sustainable access to district facilities during non-instructional hours, with focus on serving SFUSD students first. So a perfect example of that would be before and after school care programs, managing permits that we issue to tenants that serve as students first. So the next slide shows an overview of our property. It's okay. As you can see, we have leased properties in red, school sites in green, administrative sites, and vacant sites as well. For school sites, we have actually a total of 130 schools. They include 12 early ed sites, 76 elementary schools, 15 middle schools, 17 high schools, 5 charter schools, and 5 county community schools. So the next slide, please. So what do we do? As you can see, my office in the purple there. So we start with SFUSD properties. They fall into 2 categories. We have non-school sites and school sites. So non-school sites usually are, for example, lease sites or administrative sites. And so what we do is we take the non-instructional hours and non-school sites, and what we do is we issue permits and leases to specific tenants or permittees. We also issue MOUs for donations, those physical donations to specific schools. Also, we collect impact fees for developments within the city, because those new developments add housing, right? They add family, which in turn creates students, students that we have to serve. So what we do is we collect impact fees to help fund the projects, to build our facilities, and to house those students. So on an average, we generate a total annual revenue of $20 million from permits, leases, and impact fees. So what we do is with those money that we generate, we transfer them back to the school sites, right, to pay for expenses such as teacher salaries, supplies, custodial responsibilities, right, and also to fund our construction projects, such as Mission Bay. For donated projects, they also go specifically to the school sites. So for example, we have gardening projects, we have play structures, we have classroom makeover projects. So all of those essentially goes back to the SFUSD property, and the cycle starts all over again. So next slide. So we run a tight ship. So that's me in the middle. I report to Karen Sullivan, who then reports to Dawn, and then ultimately to Myung and Dr. Matthews. With the $20 million that my office generate, my office comprised of 4 people, including myself. So I want to throw a big shout out to my team, Cynthia Lamb, principal clerk, Christina Marescal, clerk typist, and Stephanie Ko, junior management assistant. Stephanie just joined our team recently. My team and I take pride in providing excellent services to our community. We are multilingual, so the total of us, we speak a total of 4 languages. So next slide, please. So some of the performance metrics. We have the facilities use permit tier fee structure. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a tier fee structure that's been adopted by the board. Depending on the type of event, we provide a variety of discounts. As you can see on the left side, we have SFUSD and school events. So we provide discounts for like application fee, facilities fee, per vehicle parking fee. So for our own events, basically everything is free except for staffing costs, naturally because we have to pay our employees. On the other end of the spectrum, for example, we have private and commercial events. They don't get any discounts. They have to pay everything plus a market rate. So the goal is to serve our students first. So we try to do our best to keep the fees as low as possible. And we make that up by charging a higher rate for our commercial and private events. Next slide, please. So some of the performance, financial performances for facilities use permit revenue for the past 5 years. So on average, we generate about $2.5 million, and we issue and process approximately 1,500 permits per year. Sorry, my computer just blacked out. During the pandemic in 2021, you see a dip there because we were in lockdown and shelter in place, and a lot of our school sites were closed. And in fact, for permits that we issued that year, for 1920, we had to go and cancel about 300 permits. But you can see in 2021, we were on the road to recovery as the pandemic gets better and we have vaccine and the economy opens up, our facilities open back up for the public use. Next slide, please. So the next slide is the school facilities impact fee structure. Like I mentioned earlier, we collect a per square foot impact fee on construction projects within the city. And the fees really, they vary, depends on the type of project. So for example, if it's a residential project where they're building a condos or a house or apartment, obviously that generates a greater impact, creating a student that we have to serve. So it's a greater impact, so we charge a higher fee. On the other end of the spectrum, like a self-storage, like a U-Haul or something like that, we would charge a lower fee per square foot. And then in between, we have retail and services, office, research and development, etc. So this fee structure was adopted in 2018 by the board. And I wanted to also let you know that we are going to propose a new fee structure, which you see on the right side of the screen, that we will be bringing to the board in the fall for adoption. Next slide, please. So this is a graph that shows the school impact fee revenue for the past 5 years. On average, we generate around $10 million per year. And it really depends on how the economy is doing and how developments are taking place. So you can see in 18-19, we have a construction boom where we generated more than $14 million. But to the right, you can see that as constructions have slowed down a bit, right? We have interest rates are going up, construction materials are going up, and also inflation rate is also going up. So we see a bit of a slowdown in construction. So as a result, our revenue has gone down a little bit. Next slide, please. There are also a set of leases that my office manage. And on an annual basis, we generate about 7.5 to close to $8 million of revenues per year. Next slide, please. Some recent achievements. What we did is we improved access and efficiency by streamlining our permitting process. So now we have everything online to make everything more efficient. Although we do have some of the customers and applicants who still sort of prefer the old-fashioned way and wanted to come in and submit papers, and we accommodate that. And that's why we have a set office hour that we open to provide services to our community. But naturally, in this modern age, we want to be more efficient. So we have changed to paperless, and we have one central location for applicants to submit the application. We also generated additional revenues for the school district. Oh, could we go back to the other slide? Yes, sorry. Thank you. We revised the school impact fee square footage calculation to include all the spaces within a residential structure. In the past, DBI would subtract out spaces like closets and bathrooms. And obviously we need those spaces, right? When a family lives in a condo or in a house. So we revised the square footage, we revised the calculation method, and that translate to an increase in 25% in revenue. And it also simplified and expedited the process with DBI, because now DBI staff doesn't have to go and subtract out the square footage. As I mentioned earlier, we also completed the school impact fee study to increase the fees, which we'll be bringing to the board in the fall. We also promoted inter-agency collaborations. We're working with DBI staff to streamline the process, to make it more efficient, to also gain access to their Bluebeam file so that my staff can randomly audit DBI's square footage calculations. Next slide, please. Going forward, I wanted to flag some of the opportunities and challenges. Next slide, please. So going forward, we will, as we said earlier, we're going to increase the impact fee in the fall. We're also going to develop a tier fee structure that's similar to the, for the leases, that's similar to the tier fee structure that you just saw for facilities use permits. The idea is to take the politics out when we are renewing leases and to have a clear direction in terms of which tenant will get a discount, which tenant will get to pay a rate that's, that reflect the fair market value. We also issue a real estate RFP to evaluate all of our property holdings to better utilize a space to be more efficient. We also explore opportunities to generate additional revenues by evaluating and negotiating leases that are up for renewal. Next slide, please. So we summarize some of the opportunities that we talked about on the left side of the slide. We are also going to identify future developments that align with district's goal. But we also have some challenges ahead of us. For example, we have aging facilities. So the state of good repair is an ongoing issue. So we have to balance the state of good repair with school district's current budget constraint. We also have deferred maintenance. So obviously that will affect, which facilities we can or cannot rent out. Spaces sometimes also used inefficiently, as well as we have limited financial capacities from our CBO partners. And also sometimes politics gets in the way. So that is why we wanted to establish a tier fee structure so that staff would have a clear direction when we're negotiating leases. We're looking for a more of a sliding scale, similar to the permits, that is fully documented, fully transparent going forward. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Let me first ask if there's any public comments. Thank you. Commissioner Bogers?
Yeah, I had questions about the fee breakdown on slide 9, specifically looking at, I think it's tier 3A and 3B. Just was trying to get an idea of the numeric cost of the 100% of like custodial costs and some of the other percentages on there. So I think that's my first question. I think my second question is just, how are we gauging the accessibility and the affordability of our space rental leases for community groups and other groups that serve our SFUSD community but aren't kind of directly connected to it, and also who serve folks beyond it? And if there's any way that we're gauging our, I guess, affordability for those folks. So if that makes sense for both questions.
Yeah, sure. So the goal when we develop this fee structure is to provide the lowest fees for our own, first to serve our own students. So for our own events would get the lowest fee. The groups that serve SFUSD students, which is tier 2, would get the next lowest fee. And they get a 50% discount on facilities fees. Now, there's a difference between a 3A and a 3B. Because 3A is a community event, civic event, or nonprofit event. 3B is a religious event. I think there was a legal definition that we have to separate the churches from the rest of the organization. So that is why the 3B has to pay 100% of the facilities fees. And basically, 3B is just pay all of our costs, a break even. Basically, we didn't give them any discount. We didn't make any revenue out of them. We just break even with them. Now, With the community event, we wanted to be a good partner with our community. So we do give them some discount. As you can see, they have a 10% discount on indoor and outdoor facilities fees. But as we get closer to user groups that serve our students, because we want to focus on our students, we provide them with a greater discount. So the tier 2 user group, for example, would be like after-school programs, right? They may or may not charge a fee, but we wanted to extend them a discount to support our students. So they receive a 50% discount on facilities fees. Now, in terms of staffing fee, everybody pay a staffing fee across the board because we have to pay the employees, we have to pay the custodian, we have to pay the T10s that work the hours. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
No, it does. I think as far as the logic, I guess I'm asking, is there any feedback process that we get from, and I guess I'm curious about difference between tier 2 and tier 3A.
Yeah.
And so is every group who has a MOU with the district in some way, shape or form under tier 2? Who's serving students in some capacity?
All of our, for example, Beacon and Excel sites are absolutely in tier 2.
Actually, for Excel and Beacon sites, we went beyond that. What we did was we put them in the tier 1.
Oh, okay.
Because we work closely with Melly's office to support our students. So, so for them, we waive everything, only charge them staffing fees. So the tier 2s would be the fee-based after-school programs. They would charge a tier 2 fee, and they would pay a portion of the facilities fee.
And groups who have MOUs to run programs for students during the school day or things like that, that aren't the after-school service providers like the Beacons or things like that. I guess for the other groups, they would fall into tier 3A then?
They would fall under tier 2. As long as they serve SFUSD students, they serve at least 75% of SFUSD students, whether they charge a fee or not charge a fee, or whether or not they have an MOU, it doesn't matter, because what we wanted to see is who is serving our students. They pay a tier 2 fee.
So if you have an MOU with the district and you serve students, you would fall in tier 2. And is that regardless of what the event you're having at the school is, or is it conditional on the event being for 75% of SFUSD students? Or does that not matter in the range?
Yeah, they have to serve at least 75%. The participants have to be at least 75% of SFUSD students. For example, if they have a summer camp, right, they might have a combination of SFUSD students or maybe students from private schools or, maybe from another city. But as long as they serve at least 75% of them into the whole participant meets that percentage, they will get a tier 2 fee.
Okay, so I guess to get clarity, if I was hosting an event as a group with a MOU to do a lunch program at a high school, an event that was 50% SFUSD students, 50% parents, guardians, or like adult relatives who aren't students, because I'm not at the 75% student threshold, I would qualify for the tier 3A category.
Correct. So that would be considered of a community event. So you get a tier 3A.
Okay, I think I have more questions about that, but they are not appropriate for now. And I guess if we could get an idea of how much the custodial costs are, I guess, on average for kind of a typical school, or if there is kind of a tiered breakdown based on the size of the site or something like that, I would love to get, I guess, more clarity about those percentages.
Sure.
I believe it's an overhead rate that's calculated based on the time duration of the event.
Yeah.
So you're paying for, if your event was 3 hours or 5 days, right, you're paying kind of a version of an hourly rate associated with providing support to that site and the number of participants.
And will we be able to, I guess, is that rate per site, or is it standard across the district, or how?
It is standard based on level, elementary, middle, and high school. They each have a rate because some of the high schools have larger facilities, so like gymnasiums would get charged a higher rate. But they do have a standard rate, and that a lot of them really is cost recovery. So there is a current regular hourly rate, and then there's an overtime rate. So for example, if an after-school program that runs between 3 and 6, and the custodian is there doing regular duty, then we would charge a portion of a regular hourly rate, which is more of a cost sharing sort of formula that has been this formula has been developed by a consultant from UC Berkeley City Schools and Centers City for Schools in UC Berkeley back when they developed this fee structure, and they look at all the costs that the school district has to spend to keep the building running, right? Including, insurance, facilities costs such as ongoing operational costs, maintenance, depreciation. They take all of that into consideration and they come up with a price per classroom or each type of room. And that formula has been built into our online system, and that it gets automatically calculated based on the number of classrooms that you select and the time and the date. So obviously, if you use something during a holiday, you would be paying a custodial overtime rate. But if you're using it during a school day and after school hours, it would be a regular rate, but it's still a cost sharing formula.
Commissioner, I think we can provide you with all the kind of background formulas that are used to establish the different overhead rates. It's in the permit. I mean, the rates themselves are also in the applications, that when organizations submit a permit request, there is a fair level of transparency, I think, about what they're being charged and what it's for. So we can share that with you.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's just to get a feel of how much we're actually asking for sites to use, whether it's an outside space or some classes. I'm glad that you're gonna get that to me. I just know on the community side, the ability to have access to schools to do things that support the broader community aren't really there because of the fee structure and the cost, where if you aren't a very wealthy community group, you don't really have the ability to afford some of the high costs that come with using the spaces. Which makes me wonder if there's ways that we as a district could supplement some of that cost to support more community engagements in our schools being more community hubs.
Commissioner, I'll point that, appreciate that feedback, and I believe that was the main incentive behind creating the tiered structure, was to support that sliding scale for different levels of affordability. But I think it is hard in a city like San Francisco, even SFUSD, where our rates compared to the open fair market for equivalent facilities would be considered bargain basement. Nonetheless, we are working with a number of partners who are extremely fiscally constrained, right? And try and put as much of their budget as possible into direct service to kids. And so that is the spot, I think, that we continue to navigate and find ourselves in.
Thank you. The line of questioning is exactly what I want to follow up on in terms of maximizing community groups that work with our families and students to allow them to be able to use our facilities at the lowest cost possible. And so if that means, for me, like if that means overcharging on the retail side of the Sprite side of the fee structure, to subsidize that, I think I'd be really interested in looking at doing something like that, because I mean it's obvious. I mean, so many of our organizations, CBOs in our city that work with our families and our students, don't have the capacity to, even on the tier 2, to be able to afford the custodial cost and whatever ancillary costs come with it. And if we want to really be a community school model district, I mean, granted, we are in line to get more resources as soon as tomorrow, maybe, or it's going to be announced tomorrow by Hillary Ronan's office, and as well as the state money that we look in line to be getting for community schools. We might be able to use those funds as well to help our community organizations work with our students and families more in our sites. So I'd be really interested in looking at this fee structure that you're talking about that came about in 2018 was because of a lot of the work that community organizations were advocating for at that time. So it was a move in the right direction. I just think we can do better. I want to ask about, I think it's slide 11. no, not slide 11, the one about the impact fees. Who gets to change the impact fees?
We do,
We do.
and that's why we plan on approaching the board in early fall with a revised and higher fee structure.
Okay, great. The last question I have.
If I could actually just add one note, though, it is not we get to decide, you have to demonstrate a nexus between the fee that you are charging and the growth anticipated by the district.
Okay, great.
So,
I think I spoke with you a number of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, about the idea of, so if we want to maximize kind of the retail side of charging higher fees for our sites, I think it would be in our best interest to have a really easy to access and to navigate page on our district website that shows the facilities that we have, so that people can actually see what they are looking to permit fee for, because we have so many amazing sites throughout our district that could be available and availed of for profit organizations that want to lease out or permit fee out our sites, so strike lease out, permit fee out facilities, and we don't have that. So if there was that ability for us to do it and include the fee structure in that, I think that organizations would be more apt to look to us to be able to access our sites at a higher cost than we would charge, obviously, for nonprofits and for our own folks. So I think it would be really worthwhile to look into something like that, because we want to maximize our revenues clearly in this regard. So, but thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. I actually also want to follow up on this. What is the difference between our permit fees and leases?
leases are for long-term uses of our property and permits are for short-term uses.
So for Beacon, what are they?
Those are permits that are annually renewed.
Okay.
Can I give an example of a lease? So City College site in the Mission on Valencia and I guess 23rd, that's a 70-year lease.
Oh.
It's a district property, used to be Downtown High, which has moved to Potrero Hill. And so that site became vacant and we did a long-term 70-year lease, which I guess we're in the 15th year of, I guess, now. And then they have first rights to leasing it after the 70-year term is up.
I see. So it would be good if on page 5, I guess there are 15 sites that are leased. And those are multi-year, as in decades, multi-year.
In some cases, decades, and in some cases, 5 years.
So the shortest would be 5 years.
No, we have leases that I believe at this point are even shorter than that. We do have a few tenants who are on month to month, essentially at this time. Not many, but we do have those. But most of our leases, it's actually quite a wide range of terms.
I was going to ask if we can have a document that summarizes, not summarized, but gives the next level detail from page 5, which is the 15 lease sites, 128 schools, 11, like an Excel. I don't know if there's an Excel or something that, don't present it, just like send it to us.
Absolutely. We have a property database, Commissioner, and we can provide you with an Excel worksheet that lists out each of the sites and kind of shows what kind of use it's designated for.
Yes, that would be great. And then also I would like to inquire and look across all of our properties to see which ones might be potentially turned into teacher housing.
Commissioner, we have done a survey in the past of our properties. And in fact, the board has already designated 3 properties as potential sites for future educator housing. And these are in addition to the current FSK Annex project that's been in development. Those 3 sites include the Malcolm X Annex, 7th and Lawn, and also a property out in the inner Richmond. That I'm spacing on these.
Is it Cook?
Thank you,
Yeah.
20 Cook Street. Thank you, Commissioner Sanchez.
Great, if you could also somehow send that information over.
Absolutely.
Yep. And the impact fees, is that for I see retail, I think it's on page 11. I see retail, office, research and development. That's for, is it building activity on our properties?
No, it's new construction across the city. And so we are able to charge, because of the direct relationship between the growth of both residential and commercial properties that generate impacts to the school district, we are able to charge an impact fee. The use of those funds is constrained and that you may only use revenues that you've collected from developer impact fees for, again, capital expenditures, not for operating, and then further constrained and that the types of capital expenditures should be associated with the expansion of your school site's program to accommodate changes in population growth, expansion in population growth.
I see. For example, if somebody wants to build an office building, then we would tag on this fee that they would have to pay, and that would come to the district
correct.
for capital improvement.
That's correct. And you, for example, you cannot use developer impact fees to pay for routine deferred maintenance, capital and projects. So if you're just, resurfacing, if you're resurfacing your asphalt schoolyard and it's exactly the same size as it was before, you cannot use developer impact fees for that.
I see. So then on page 12, the school impact fee revenue, that is an indication of how much construction has been going on in the city.
It is.
Got it. Okay, I think that current lease fee structure and the real estate RFP, I think page 17, I had a question. What's the current lease fee structure and then the real estate RFP? Yeah, I just wanted a little more clarification on the bullet points on page 17.
Commissioner, I can speak to the RFP. We've been advised on and off by different real estate firms to help provide advice to us on routine transactions that come up. For example, adjusting our annual leases for a CPI factor and providing also market comp specs so that when we do have to look at a lease or a property, we're able to compare and know what market rate actually charges or revenue would be for a specific property. We are in the process of doing an RFP to both select a company to help us with those tasks, but also to help us begin to think about the district's space needs. I've talked about this on and off with Commissioner Sanchez since I've gotten here, about the need for thinking about our administrative buildings in particular, and what are the benefits and or advantages of further kind of consolidating and or organizing our staff in ways that would promote more productivity and ease of commute, and then what that means in terms of properties that could be freed up for other uses. So that is something we're looking for, that kind of technical assistance right now to help us understand that. In terms of our leases, I think broadly speaking, we need to think about the leases that we have and the wide range of lessees, right? So from City College to the Westfield Mall to Scrap, we have a wide range of tenants with different abilities to participate in a rental to pay rent, essentially. And that one of the things I'm interested in doing is, as we look at the district's financial situation and think about the next 5 to 10 years of leases that are up for renewal, how can we both balance our community-minded goals, but also think strategically about the properties we have and how to either generate more revenue or at least reduce our liabilities associated with those properties and the maintenance of them.
Great, thank you very much. All right, I think. Great, well, thank you very much, Dawn and Ms. Lee, for your presentation. Very enlightening, and you have a couple of follow-up items to email to us. All right, thank you. I think our next order of business is adjournment. Yay, I like it. 7:30.